I went to a dance school in Lagos and I saw how darker skinned dancers, female dancers, were treated. And I observed, I personally also was subjected to some of the things, and I've had people tell me, or if you were like slightly light skinned, you'd be better at what you do. And most people always tell me, "Oh, you're beautiful. You're beautiful for a dark skinned woman." And I'm like, what does that mean? What do you mean I'm beautiful for a dark skinned woman?
Hi, Olabanke. It's nice to have you here with us at Northwestern Program of African Studies. I'll let you introduce yourself. Okay. Thank you very much for the privilege to be here. My name is Olabanke Goriola, and I'm a third-year PhD candidate in performance studies. I'm here at Northwestern, and I like to call myself a multidisciplinary artist scholar from Nigeria. Thank you.
Interesting. Good to have you, Olabanke.
Thank you.
I want to start from that doctoral candidate. And I love that, and congratulations too.
Thank you.
It's awesome, and I want to bring in your research here, and if you can maybe tease out what you are researching on and tell us how performance studies is also key to what you are doing, not just as a doctoral candidate, but also your personal life, and also looking at the curatorial aspects of generally this conversation. So want you to talk to us about this, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So I think I will start with what performance studies is, and so performance studies, or what I do with performance studies. So performance studies is a program where we use performance as an object of analysis or a method of inquiry. And my research has to do with colorism. And what is colorism? It's a term coined by Alice Walker in 1983 in one of her books called In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And she defines it as the prejudicial or preferential treatment of same race people based solely on their color. So let's think about the Black race, how we think light skinned people within that race, they are much more superior to the darker skinned people. And this all is rooted in the transatlantic slave trade and the whole idea of who is considered the enslaved house person and the field house person. So the darker skinned people tend to be the ones on this field. And those people who are light skinned are much more in close proximity to whiteness, are considered much more intelligent. So you tend to like see them in the house of the enslaved masters, or in the house of the I don't like using the word slave masters, enslavers. And they also, because of their proximity to whiteness, they had access, mostly not all of them. So I'm not trying to make a generalization, but because of that proximity, they had access to opportunities, which up until today, you would notice that light-skinned Black people tend to be, much more successful than dark-skinned people. And if you look at the entertainment industry too, that's what you see. So my own research, I take colorism from the US context and I bring it into the Nigerian context to think about this Eurocentric idea of beauty, this westernized beauty standards that I observed in the entertainment industry. And I grew up in Nigeria and I went to a dance school in Lagos and I saw how darker skinned dancers, female dancers were treated. And I observed, I personally also was subjected to some of the things, and I've had people tell me, or if you were like slightly light skinned, you'd be better at what you do. And most people always tell me, "Oh, you're beautiful. You're beautiful for a dark skinned woman." I'm like, what does that mean? What do you mean I'm beautiful for a dark skinned woman? And most of my friends also complained about this whole subject marginalization when it comes to their skin tone and not getting jobs, especially like music videos. The video vixens are like light skinned, and which is really funny because that what I'm talking about, my experience was like 2017, 2018. And it's funny that some of the things have changed now, and I'll talk about that. But right now, what I'm researching is I'm looking at the dark skinned female performers in the Lagos entertainment industry. And I'm looking at how they maneuver their ways in these spaces that tend to tell them that their dark skin is not beautiful enough to be in those spaces. And I'm also looking at this whole dynamics of colorism within the entertainment industry, the sacrifices that they have to make. Because I noticed some people had to succumb to using skin bleaching products to get this illusion of whiteness because, yeah, once they are light skin, men tend to think they're really beautiful. And there are some people who I know they are still really dark skinned until now, but they still find success in what you're doing. So I'm looking at those different ways at which some who succumbed are surviving and those who did not are there to this whole idea of beauty standards are still also making waves and how they use like social media platforms to create the spaces for themselves because media itself perpetuate colorism. And when you look at advertisements that we consume, you see the way things are portrayed, the whole idea representation that comes from the West, and how people in Nigeria try to find themselves within this whole global discourse of beauty. And so that's what I'm researching. I'm looking at female dancers, I'm looking at models, I'm looking at actresses in the Nigerian industry. Um, and the reason why I said it's really funny now because when I went home in 2022 summer, I was talking to one of my friends who is also really dark skinned and she works as a talent manager in Nigeria. And one of the conversation that came up was, she said she wouldn't think colorism doesn't exist in the industry, that it's still there. But when we think about movies such as Black Panther, the representation of blackness, and Beyonce's like Black is King, that there is this way everyone's moving towards Africa and everyone's thinking about African aesthetics, African blackness as beautiful. And that way it's actually suppressing that this whole idea of colorism that dark skinned women are not good enough for those spaces. So she wouldn't say colorism is no longer existing, but for now, everyone's moving towards this side of the world, and you would see darker skinned women in like Wizkid's music videos, Burna Boy's music videos, and they are used as example of what beauty should be. Um, and my question was, is this a trend that's going to move back to let's go back to whiteness, let's go back to white beauty? Because there was a time when the whole idea of what beauty should be is big boobs, big bums, and you see people start subjecting themselves to like BBLs, going through the surgeries. And now the likes of the Kardashians are beginning to remove their silicone implants and stuff. And what's that telling us? Some of these people are the ones making the standards. They create the standards. So when they say this is no longer the standard, do we all follow them? And so when they say dark skinned women are no longer the standards, and now we need to move back to the West as whiteness or think about whiteness as what beauty is it going to change? Are women going to go back to this old subjugation or this old marginalization when it comes to their dark skin? So I try to see my work as historiographical because I'm looking at the emergence of like music videos in Nigeria where people, musicians or video directors or cast managers are using like biracial women or white women to now using light-skinned Nigerian women, dark-skinned Nigerian women. So I'm just looking at all those things. And because I'm still in the academia, so I know after my PhD, it doesn't stop there. So I'm still going to like keep following the trend to see what's going to happen next.
Based on what you've said, I want to look at colorism, skin, and that concept of double consciousness. Does it really feature prominently in your research? And I know that this Nigerian actress, Beverly Naya, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that she produced this film.
2020.
2020, yeah, Skin. And I think it was so popular at that point when she released that. I think it's a documentary.
Yeah.
It is a documentary production. How do you kind of marry all these concepts, double consciousness as propounded by Dubois, W.E.B. Du Bois, and looking at the works of people like Francis Galton, who use, like most of what you are saying, looking at that anthropomorphic aspect of viewing people, looking at people. As a photographer, I have issue with that when you want to photograph someone and you don't have the license to do that. And you've mentioned quite a lot about Nollywood video vixens in Nigeria who don't get that license to feature in these videos, and because of their skin type or skin color, and they get rejected. I'm also looking at it from, how most of the people that kind of constructed this narrative, this, I call it parochial narrative, and allowed us, to kind of struggle with it. How do you view all these concepts, and how can you tease that for us?
Yeah. I would say Beverly Naya's work, Skin documentary, is one of my reference points when it comes to thinking about colorism in Nigeria, because everyone keeps saying when we think about Nigeria or some African countries, maybe aside Liberia and South Africa because of their history with, but when we think about like Nigeria, Ghana, people tend to say we don't think about race because we don't have any reason to think about race. So if we don't have any reason to think about race, so why do we think there's skin tone discrimination when everyone, regardless of individual ethnic groups, we're all we're considered like one race, we're all Nigerians, and regardless of the light skin Igbo people, or if there's a I'm the only dark skin person in my family. My family members, they are like different shades of light skin, and I'm the only like visibly dark skinned person. So most people think my mom's Igbo because she's light skinned, and but when I'm thinking about the idea of double consciousness, I think most women or most people who are light skinned in the industry or in Nigeria, they understand there is light skin privilege. While most of them play on this whole privilege thing and they take advantage of it, some people also know that um they are taking advantage of it also affects the darker skinned ones. So they know it's just like one of this. I was reading a book written by one of our professors, and they talked about this whole idea of how Black people had to like perform objecthood as as a way of just thriving. So they perform, if you say this person is an illiterate, the person is dumb, they perform dumbness just to stay alive. And you would say, why are you accepting or adhering to what this person is saying about you? Why are you taking up this narrative as yours? But for Black people and who find themselves within those confined spaces, that's their own performances of whatever, like staying alive. It's about survival. Survival. It's like mask wearing. One of the authors, EPJ, is the dean of SOC, School of Communication. In his book Appropriating Blackness, he talked about how Black women back then were caregivers to white people, performed by wearing masks of as mummies. Like if you call them old, foolish, and whatever, they wear that not because they are old and foolish, but because they just need to like stay alive. So when people who are light skinned, they are aware of it, and people who are dark skinned, they are aware that there are those privileges that comes with their skin. So when you said you're in performance studies, my assumption is, oh, you are studying about people who
artists, performers, like performance artists, like dancers.
That comes up, like
Like,
performance studies, but we don't just say,
thespian artists
well,
or thespians. Sorry.
yes, okay, that comes up in performance studies. We don't just say we're studying like people who are performers.
Okay.
But in performance studies, we use performance as an object or a method of understanding things. For example, the everyday life is a performance.
Mhm.
You wake up, you brush your teeth, you pray, you do things. That's a performance.
Okay.
It's a ritual. So we look at maybe I can decide to want to write about whiskey. It still falls under performance studies, but I can decide to look at performance as other ways. For example, I know someone studying borders. How does border divide people? But you wouldn't call border a performance because it doesn't have to do with like subject or a live subject,
Yeah.
right? But we look at those other things like that in performance studies. We look at different things, but we think about it through the lens of performance. Like, how can we see performance in this thing, and how can we understand?
So it's not necessarily about artistic,
No,
creative expression.
it is not necessarily about that. I know someone who studies recipes. The idea of conjuring recipes is a performance to them, because how do you bring things together? There's a creative process to bringing recipes together. So it's not just about they're looking at theater. I know someone studying things about water. The idea of how does water serve as a space of escape in terms of both on top of water and underneath water. So yeah.
So it's all about livelihood, living. From what you're saying, I'm seeing it from a wide spectrum of perspectives. I'm looking at politics.
Exactly.
I'm looking at movements, like you mentioned, border crossing, because I've been involved in a border crossing project. That is a huge performance. I'm looking at even the culinary aspect, like cooking, going into movie production, and also bringing it into the artistic milieu, where you have artists like Jelili Atiku, the Nigerian performance artist. And I think it's very interesting, to look at it from that performance studies point of view, where it's not just only kind of narrowed down to what we do on the stage, like opera, like maybe Jelili Atiku person, but we're looking at it from the point we wake up to the point we go to bed. So every aspect of what we do in a day, and kind of encapsulate this.
That device performance studies as a discipline here at Northwestern is different from the IPTD.
Okay.
So the IPTD is
Sorry, what's IPTD?
interdisciplinary PhD in theater and drama.
Okay.
So they are doing theater and drama, but performance studies is not boxed in that way. Sorry to IPTD folks, but performance studies is not boxed in that way, and that's one of the good things about the fact that anyone can come into performance studies and find their space. A friend of mine is researching gentrification in New Orleans. It's about buildings, but it also makes us think about the idea of power. Who are those people who make some decisions? So performance studies entails different things. Like, it gives you the space to think about life in a broader view. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Did you have?
I think we have okay, I'm just gonna ask you about
It's going to be on the record, but something about some of the points that you made me remember when I went to a museum in Nigeria, probably the museum in Calabar or Jos. I went to both, but in one of them there was this old newspaper, okay, or document that contained an ad, and it was by, there was this company. They've metamorphosed now. They've evolved into a new name. But then it was called the Royal Niger Company. Yes. USA. They are now you leather. Thank you. So the Royal Niger Company, I believe they produce the bar soap called Pierre.
Vaseline.
Yep.
A lot.
They did. So they produce Vaseline. And now they are very like pro. Okay, anyway, it's very political. Yes, the protest. Like Vaseline now is like, oh, for your dark, for your the Royal Nigeria Company, then the bar soap that they were advertising, it had maybe a woman or a baby go into a bathtub, and the cartoon was like darkly like shaded with black.
Right.
When she not and then where after bathing with the soap, just like big bubble, just the head that stuck out
It's now white.
was white. Yes, I saw it. And like that was no, yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons why my work also has to do with like archive, because some of these things are not like accessible digitally.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about going, into the archive and looking at. But I saw this.
I think we've come a long way as a society. I know we've come a long way. I saw that this was far back as 2016. I saw that in the museum, and I was like, crazy. Like, what even think this?
I saw a version of that. This man was like dressed in all these Victorian era clothes, and he stood in front of the mirror, and he was saying something about how we need to go to. I put it down in one paper I wrote recently, and it's like we need to go into like the deeper parts of the African continent, and we need to clean every dirt. Either like the black man must become civilized. We need to make them civilized, and in the lower part of the paper there was this black man that was on his knees begging for this soap. It's called this person wrote it in her paper, and it's called commodity racism. Yeah, how commodities were used as a way to like colonize the country or the continent rather.
Oh, well, that's a whole thing, just like actually soaps are thing.
Because you see this white person who commands power, and you want to have access to this power. You want to be a player of it. So you exchange things and take the soap, thinking that I think it's also one of the ways colorism and skin bleaching practices evolved, because people want to be respected, and they want to have access to this old power, this respect, and this superiority. So they play. It's a performance. That's why I call my work a performance, because they're performing.
So thank you, Banke,
Thank you
for
having me.
honoring our invitation. It's been a very awesome time sharing and learning from you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
I hope my mic was not too off.
Well, you did move back.
So should I repeat it?